Do you want to learn how to live a confident, successful and fulfilling life without feeling overwhelmed, frustrated and feeling as if you never measure up? Find out how to figure it all out on today's episode. Every single person is powerful, perfect as they are. And I believe we all have a role to play in making this world a better place. My purpose is to help people step into their power. Imagine how it would be if you could feel consistently happy, successful and fulfilled, to be thriving rather than just surviving. Over this series, I'm going to share with you lots of principles and strategies to help you do just that. I'll also share with you just how you can become more confident, successful, happier and more fulfilled. I've learnt to do it, and I've taught and coached many others to do the same. But it wasn't always like that. I'd like to share with you a little of my story and why I wrote Thriving Not Surviving, the 5 secret pathways to happiness, success and fulfillment, and founded the Thrive Together tribe. So here's a little of my story. I was in my late 20s and I was ready for promotion. I applied for the largest school in the district, and I was told when I initially went there that they didn't want me, that they wanted a man. In those days you could get away with it. Despite that, I went ahead and I applied for the job, and I was appointed directly to be the catalyst for change. I was determined to do a really good job. And so, with the staff and the head, spent from the September until the half term in February strategically planning how we were going to move the school from its old-fashioned way of being into the modern century. February 1983 was half term, and I was really pleased to get there. I was really tired. I had a ski trip planned, and it was a welcome break. Now, that Christmas, I had had a new pair of skis. And in those days, the style was to wear the longest skis possible. And I was convinced by the gentleman in the shop to have an extra 10 centimetres in length. Well, I spent most of the week wrapping those 10 centimetres around my neck. And on the Thursday of the week, I had a really bad fall, and I split my brand new ski suit from ankle all the way through up to the thigh. And I was pretty shaken. So on the last ski day, I said to the people I was skiing with, my friends, you go off and I will actually just go and get my confidence back. And we were at St. Anton in Austria, and there's a beautiful run from Kristalhof. And so off I went. And I spent the morning poodling about getting my confidence back. I met them for lunch, and they were really excited because they'd found a new run. And so off we went. We got onto the chairlift, and as we rose up from St. Anton, so the noise of the village suddenly disappeared. And all I could see were little black dots of skiers at the bottom of the slopes. The mountains looked magnificent, covered in snow. It was absolutely beautiful. I got off the chairlift and I followed them. We took a sudden turn to the left, and there I could see that there was something wrong. Not only in front of us was there a steep drop, but the look on their faces told me they'd taken the wrong turning. We stood there just in silence for a few minutes, I think, while we all got our bearings. Now, I'd run black runs before. Skiing those was not a problem, but this was a monster. For those of you that ski will know what a mogul is. It's where you get a lump that's been carved out by the weather. And moguls can be a couple of inches tall, but these were 6 foot. And the whole of this very steep slope was just a mogul field. There was no way back. The only thing to do was to actually take my nerves in my hand and actually go for it. To start with, I did quite well. Skiing on a mogul means that you ski across and then you pivot on the mogul and then slip down and then ski the other way. But it got to a point where I skied too far and there was nowhere to pivot, and I fell. And I fell quite a distance, and it took me about 20 minutes to actually go back and retrieve the ski I'd lost. I finally made it down to where my friends were sitting, and each of them was sitting on a mogul, rather like an elf on a mushroom. I took my skis off and sat down, and we started to talk. It was a beautiful day, absolutely stunning. The sun was shining, the sky was blue, and suddenly I found myself falling. Initially, I just kept on bumping onto mogul after mogul, and then everything went black. I finally came to. I don't know how long I was there, and people started to bring me first my gloves, my glasses, and eventually my friends reached me with my skis. They wanted to call the blood wagon. I was just as determined that they wouldn't, and very slowly I managed to get my way down to the hotel. That night, the room kept on spinning round and I kept on reliving the fall. Next morning we were journeying home, and it was a pretty gruesome journey. As soon as I got home, my mum took one look at me and she took me off to A&E. They said I'd got concussion and that I'd tweaked a nerve in my neck. I went into school on the Monday, wasn't making much sense. I have to say most people thought that that was pretty standard, and I was sent home. And over the next few days, I began to recover. Some weeks later, I was cleared by my local doctor to go on the skiing trip with the children. We were there in Switzerland this time, and the children had a great time, and I was determined to do my bit. But as the week went on, I became more and more like Quasimodo. The last day, the children were doing their races and their medals, and at the end of the day, I had really had it, and I finally gave in, and I went up to lie on my bed. 3rd floor bunk. Don't know quite how I got up there. Very soon after I actually was lying down, I became aware of the fact that I couldn't move my right side. I was completely paralysed. I was frightened, but I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to let the children know that there was something wrong. And so I lay there for some time, waiting until somebody came. Just imagine that your body that you've learnt to rely on, suddenly you can't move. Once someone came, it was pandemonium. The ambulance came and I was taken to a local hospital and then to Geneva University Hospital. And I spent some time there and then was transferred to our local hospital. And it took several weeks for me to regain enough mobility to get back to school. It was still a huge struggle, and I was really grateful when the summer holidays came. On August the 8th, at 8 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call that was going to change my life forever. And it was the wife of my head teacher, my principal, who was phoning me to tell me that John Hughes, lovely man, who was the head, had suddenly died. I, in that moment, became the acting head, and I was determined that the school should do well, and for a term I was just acting head, and then I became the permanent head. Very young, very green, didn't know what I didn't know, but I was absolutely determined that the children and the staff should thrive. Over the next few years, I was in and out of hospital for them to look at why my mobility was continuing to deteriorate. I had a real problem with fatigue and pain. Now, my school was on a very, very spread site, but I was a bit pig-headed, I have to say, and I avoided using a wheelchair. I didn't want to do that because I was so worried about what would others think. It all came to a head in the summer holidays, this now a few years later, when I went with some friends to some beautiful gardens, Wisley, some of you may know it. And I was so pig-headed that I could only manage to get from the car to the entrance, and I wouldn't let them hire a wheelchair. So I sat in the car park while they went round the garden. Fortunately, in many ways, things were taken out of my hands, and I was in hospital very soon after that, and when I came out, I had no choice. Interestingly, nobody batted an eyelid. The children didn't take any notice. The parents may have talked at the school gate, but they never said anything to me. And the local authority were nothing but supportive. I decided at this point that I was going to keep away from doctors, and I managed to do that until 1996. I was out in the garden just planting some plants. I'm really keen on my garden, and I sneezed. I felt something ping in my back, and I knew something was wrong. But it was 3 weeks before the summer holiday, and in my usual fashion, I just carried on. I got to the last day, and then I found I couldn't do any more. I went to the doctor, I was taken straight to hospital, and they discovered that I had ruptured a disc in my back. And I had surgery, but unfortunately there were complications, and I had what's known as failed back surgery syndrome. Every time I put my left foot to the floor, I fainted because of the pain. Over the next 18 months, I had a number of nerve blocks, and by the end of 18 months, I could just about manage to walk to the end of my very small garden, and I really felt that things were beginning to improve. Now, I was very pleased to get to the summer holiday. You can see a pattern here, really. It was a bit of a struggle, but I managed. The last day came, and at the end of the day, in the evening, all of the staff went out for a celebratory meal. I got home, and I suddenly felt very sick. I was sick, and I felt something go in my back. I knew I'd done something significant, and went straight to the hospital, and I had ruptured yet another disc. The second operation resulted in me being completely unable to stand. Now, I was in hospital for several weeks, but 5 days after coming out of hospital, I was back at school. Those days were pretty bleak. I knew how hard it was to learn to walk as an adult. When you learn to walk as a child, it's pretty easy because you're fairly low to the ground. That's something I'm not. I'm quite tall. But I recognised that if I could do it once, that I could do it again. One of the problems for me when I was at home is if my carer hadn't left out a cup of coffee or a cup or filled the kettle, I couldn't do anything. I was really disabled. However, when I went to school, my eyes, my brain, my hands and my mouth certainly worked, and I could do something that I loved. And so for me it was a no-brainer. 5 days after being out of hospital, I was back at school doing what I could do. And for me it was all about focusing on what you can do rather than what you can't, because there's a gift in every disability, in every crisis in your life. I couldn't get into my classrooms, but the gift for me was that the approach to empowering people, helping them take responsibility for their own actions or lack of them, actually made a huge difference. What it did is it helped me create a structured leadership program, which meant that excellence was something that everybody knew that they were striving for, and that they could not only do it for themselves, but they would do it for other people. That it was successful was shown in the fact that we won many accolades, including being on the best 100 schools in England list twice during my headship. Now, I was invited to do a number of roles when I was also a head. I became an Ofsted inspector, I worked as an advisor for the DFES, a trainer facilitator for the National College of Leadership and the London Institute. And the gift of my disability was that they were interested in how I had developed a way of empowering people to actually help them be the best they could be. In 2004, my health was deteriorating, and I was given an ultimatum by my neurologist that I could either carry on as I was doing, working a 14, 15-hour day, 4 or 5 days a week, and if I did that, what would happen is that I would become housebound, unable to drive and unable to work. Or I could leave the job I loved and actually do something different. Around the same time, I had an internal spinal stimulator fitted. So there was I had retired from school, And for me, it felt very much like I had as a teenager. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I looked at all of the different things that I had, skills and attributes that I had. And I took myself off to do a research program which looked at what were the issues facing organisations in a whole wide range of industries around the development of people and the developing of leadership. As a result, I wrote Kickstart My Career and Manage Your Staff More Effectively, and they were designed to be my calling card, if you like. I also did a lot more training. I was already a qualified coach. I became an NLP master practitioner, and I did all sorts of coaching. And I decided to go and see Tony Robbins. He was doing a motivational training course at the Excel Centre in London. When I arrived, there were 10,000 people on the course. Pretty amazing. A big part of the course was to do the fire walk. Now, you may not be familiar with the fire walk, but that's when you walk on hot coals in your bare feet. And if you're in the right mindset, you can do it without being burned. Before I'd done the fire walk, I actually had heard Tony Robbins talk about one of his courses, and I had dismissed it as being something that I couldn't possibly do because, well, how was I going to manage in going abroad in my wheelchair on my own? I managed the fire walk and I was absolutely thrilled. I'd done it with some help. I could walk very, very small distances at that time. But when I sat back into my wheelchair and I looked back, there was a guy who was a double amputee, nothing beneath the knees. He tipped himself out onto his hands and he walked across hot coals on his hands. For me, that was a pivotal moment. If he could do that, what was I doing? How was I self-limiting? I went off that evening, I booked my flight and I booked my training course. And since then, I've done lots of training in the USA. I've been all over the world on holiday. For me, I now look at how do I make that happen rather than why can't I do it? By now, I'm doing lots of coaching. I'm working with a whole range of businesses. But I realised that all my life had just been preparation for this point. All of my work teaching had been around empowerment. All of the coaching I'd ever done was around empowerment. Even working with the businesses is around empowerment and self-belief. What I realised was that my purpose was to help other people recognise their true potential, to step into their power by being authentically, genuinely their best self. And I'd done that all the time since I'd started working. But I had a real sense that I needed to do something that was going to reach more people. Because the more I coached people, the more I worked with them, the more I realised how many people out there were feeling unhappy. Feeling confident with a great sense of self-worth is vital if you're to find your purpose and live a life of true fulfilment. It's an outcome which feels totally out of reach for many people. Even at the height of their success, many women don't feel good enough. They're much harder on themselves than they are with others. And they consistently put other people's priorities at the top of their list. As a result, they're left chasing their tail, trying hard to be Wonder Woman. But beneath it all, they are falling short, or at least they feel they're falling short. And I talk to so many people who talk about feeling worthless, isolated, frustrated, overwhelmed, or fearful of being found out. I help people transition their lives, transform their lives by stepping into their genuine, authentic power. I'm passionate about helping as many people as I can to feel empowered. Hence writing Thriving Not Surviving, the 5 secret pathways to happiness, success and fulfilment, and the creation of the Thrive Together tribe. Many people struggle with similar issues. So over this series, I'd like to share some of the questions I'm asked frequently. And here are 3 of them. So, how can I feel better about myself? Well, there's lots you can do, and this will be the focus pretty well for the whole series. In the first instance, identify the things that you'd like to be different and why it's so important to you. Identify the things you do like about yourself and why. It's really common for people to find the first activity easier. Imagine you're standing outside yourself. What do you witness? What other positive things can you identify? What's your evidence? As we go through the series, there'll be lots to help you gain greater self-confidence about being you. So on to the next question. What should I do when everyone wants me to sort something out for them and I'm already overstretched? Learn to say no, but do it graciously. So for example, rather than just saying no or doing it and actually you haven't got the time, say to somebody, I'd love to do it, perhaps another time, but I haven't got time now. Or if it's your boss, well, could you help me prioritise because I want to do a good job, but I haven't got time to do it all within the time scale. Another way is to delegate to others where that's appropriate. It's a great development opportunity. And get your partner and your children, age appropriately of course, to help. So on to number 3. How can I best manage feeling overwhelmed by everything I've got to do? So many people say they've never enough time. Overwhelm is common. Time is a finite resource. And there's a difference between urgent and important, but people often don't differentiate. Learn to prioritise. Break things down into bite-sized chunks. You can't eat a cow in one sitting, but actually, mouthful by mouthful, it can be very pleasant. So break it down into something that feels manageable to you. And even if it's only 10 minutes at a time, you will find that you get lots done. Learn to kiss the frog. Those of you who are not familiar with that, do the thing that you're dreading most, but do it first. Because incompletions take lots of energy. And actually kissing the frog and getting the horrible thing out of the way is incredibly energising. I'd like to leave you with 3 things which can have the potential to make a positive difference, and you can implement them into your life right now. Number 1, your beliefs about yourself and the world become your reality. It makes sense to ensure that your beliefs are empowering. If you believe you can't, it's a done deal. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. The trouble with limiting beliefs is we carry them every moment of every day into every relationship and situation. Number 2, it isn't the challenge which defines you. It's what you do with it. When you meet difficult situations, it's up to you to change those things which you have the power to change. And when you can't change or influence the situation, you can choose to change the way in which you deal with it. I had to use a wheelchair. It could be seen as a thing of lack or empowering. I chose to see it as my chariot on fire. Number 3, it's not the grand gestures which make the difference, but small steps taken consistently over time. Just think about how many people start a gym membership and actually go for the first couple of days and then give up. Just doing some extra exercise, climbing up the stairs a few times extra a day, will make a difference if you repeat it consistently day after day. It's been a real privilege to be with you today, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the next episode, where you can discover how the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your life, where you can learn the secret to becoming one of the top 5% of highly successful women. Till next time, be genuinely you. Want to learn more? Grab a copy of my #1 best-selling book, Thriving Not Surviving, the 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success and Fulfillment, on Amazon or wherever good books are sold.